Hello and welcome back to the Movies Made Us Do It. Me and Matt are back. How are you, Matt?
I am pretty good, sir. How are you?
I'm all right. Yeah, doing all right. It's temperature's a bit more bearable today, so
Yeah, the last couple of days it's been pretty hideous, isn't it?
yeah, it's especially up here. It's not good.
I guess in the greenhouse.
Yes, in the converted loft. It is warm. But we're here today to talk about one of your favorite movies. We did Tron last time, and I spent most of that episode talking, I feel like. And today it's your turn, as we're covering The Breakfast Club.
Yep.
One of your favorite films of all time? I want to say top 5, but that might be going too far. I don't know.
I think it has been over the years. It's
in and out every now and again.
It's one of those sort of ones that, it drops in and out because it depends on your mood, I guess, isn't it?
So I've got like my top 4. If anyone asks me for my top 5 films, the top 4 come immediately because they are the top 4. That fifth one is like, sometimes it might be Tron, sometimes it might be that. The fifth one depends on my mood completely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get that.
It's one of those things. I mean, for me, number 1 is always the same. Number 1 is always Blade Runner. That's it.
That's my number 3. That's always my number 3.
Move around a bit.
Yeah.
It's all, so. But yeah, so rambling story for this one.
Okay. Is this the when did I first see? Yeah, yes. Go on then.
So, I was on holiday in Weymouth.
Right.
I was 13 or 14, and it was a pissing down day.
As it does in England when you go on holiday to Weymouth. Yeah. That's what happens.
Exactly. Yes. And instead of going to the club that night, I decided to stay in and just watch a bit of telly on the ridiculously tiny little telly that was in the caravan.
I'm going to say you had a better night.
I think I most definitely did.
Yeah, they're going out partying in Weymouth. No offense to anyone from Weymouth. I just feel like,
Well, when I say club, I mean the on.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's the on-site
club.
Fucking yeah.
With the entertainment by the terrible.
Vaudeville
people that you get on those places. So it wasn't actually this movie that was on. It was Pretty in Pink.
Ah, well.
So yeah. I watched Pretty in Pink and immediately fell in love with Molly Ringwald.
Yeah, okay.
And when I got home, I went to my local video shop and I said, I wrote down her name and I went to the video shop and said, "Do you have any movies with this girl?" And he said, "Oh, you like gingers, do you?" And I did not know what he was talking about at first. And
he was right, though.
he completely was right. I didn't know what he was sort of saying at first.
Because Matt, you're quite open about your love of redheads. So
I really do love gingers. And he then gave me a list of the movies that they had. One was like Space Hunter: Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, which I'd already seen and hadn't made the sort of connection because she's really annoying in that movie.
Yeah.
That was, I think that was like her first major movie as well, I think. So I picked The Breakfast Club, the ones that the list he gave me, and took that home and watched that, and was immediately, okay, this is better than Pretty in Pink, even though I love Pretty in Pink.
Yeah, Pretty in Pink's great. I must admit, I think I prefer this.
Yeah, this is just it. It's just
both are fantastic.
Such a great movie. This is, it is kind of the quintessential teen movie in that it was the first movie to sort of really show teens as actual teens and not...
Even though some of them look like they're 37.
Well, so Judge Reinhold... not Judge Reinhold.
Judd Nelson.
Judd Nelson, he was 25.
Yeah. It's weird as well because he's got that grey streak and it makes him look even older.
Yeah.
It's really off-putting.
He was 25. Sheedy and Estefez were 23, and Hall and Ringwald were 16. So they were actually the...
Well, I was going to say, I mean, like Brian's the one who definitely looks the right age in this. Of all of them.
I think Mike Anthony Hall looked the same for about... 10 years. He looked like he was 12 for about 12.
You kind of get used to it with America anyway. They always they always cast older people to play high school kids,
And with him, sort of almost overnight, he became this massively built dude.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened to he find some like a trainer or something?
Yeah, well, maybe.
Because did you ever watch the Dead Zone series?
No, I never watched the series. No.
He was really good in that, actually. It was a really good series because that had what's her name, DeBoer, the second. I say the second on screen Dax. She was Ezri.
Yeah.
She plays his the girl that got away sort of thing in that, and that's a really good series. I really like that. So yeah, that started my love of this movie. It's like I said, it's John Hughes, and who is one of my favorite directors.
He's a fantastic director.
He was mostly writer. I mean, things, Planes, Trains, Uncle Buck. The Vacation. He wrote the first Vacation movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's most of these movies. Oh yeah, Ferris Bueller's and all that sort of stuff. And I love that all these movies take place in Shermer, Illinois.
Yeah, it's a fictional city that he loves to. Well, it's a suburb of Chicago, right?
Yes,
fictional suburb that he always basically all of his films pretty much happen in or around.
Apparently, it was the name of the road he grew up on, and he just basically
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, he made it a place. So Weird Science, 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller, and National Lampoon's Vacation all take place in Shermer, Illinois.
And they're all fantastic. I would watch any one of those anytime.
Yeah, and theoretically, Ferris Bueller is in the same school.
Yeah. So
it's really weird to think that Vernon is Ed Rooney's second.
Yeah.
He's his deputy. Because you think of how comedic they are in the teachers are in Ferris Bueller, and then you think of Vernon. You think surely that's not the same school.
But you think he's like the incompetent head, and then you've got this guy who's like the much more, and he probably wants his job and is pissed off at how incompetent he is. You could kind of imagine the relationship there. But yeah, so I think I first saw this movie. I think I want to say it was just a sleepover at a mate's. It was the first time I saw this. And really liked it. I certainly haven't watched it anywhere near as much as you have, though. So I feel like you're the lead on this one today. But I do love it. It's a great movie.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, the whole sort of teenage movies at that point were all beer runs and naked shower scenes and stuff like that. You're into sort of Porky's territory and stuff like that. And this was the sort of really the first sort of those movies that actually treated them like they were proper kids and not.
Yes.
The cliche.
And it's a far more watchable movie as a result.
Yeah. I mean,
I think ultimately for all of its moments, shall we say, that we'll get to, I do think it has a lovely message in the end.
Yeah, I think it does, and I think again, it's one of those things where even Molly Ringwald has come out and said there are a lot of problematic things.
Oh fuck! Well, I mean, yes.
She said she showed her kids the movies, and they were a bit funny about it, and then you think, well, yeah, but in my opinion, that doesn't mean you should go and change them.
No, not at all.
They're almost records of that decade because.
They are. I mean,
what the attitudes were like then.
Absolutely, and a lot of things, well, let's get into it because I don't want to, I guess we'll cover it as we get through it. So, we open with, Don't You Forget About Me, which I believe they shipped around quite a bit to try and actually get someone to record initially.
Billy Idol turned it down. The Pretenders turned it down. Brian Ferry turned it down. And eventually, and Simple Minds, I don't think really wanted to do it either.
No, because they just have it as a bonus track in the end.
Yeah, they were just gonna they were basically just gonna record it and kind of literally forget about it.
Yeah.
And it was released as a single, and it went absolutely stratospheric. And it was like, maybe we should actually put this on our album.
Yeah, maybe this should appear somewhere.
Billy Idol has done versions of it later on,
Yeah,
and it's actually all right. Actually, his version.
I'm sure it is. But yeah, it's such an iconic song.
Yeah.
It's always weird when you kind of discover, usually later in life, that like these songs were written for these films, because you hear that song everywhere and you're like, oh, it was actually for this movie. That's
Yeah.
But yeah, so we start with that, and obviously we get a version of the letter, don't we?
Yeah. Well, we also we get the quote from Changes.
Oh yes, yeah, of course.
Which Ali Sheedy apparently put forward, and Hughes liked, so he put that on.
Yeah.
And then we get like as they're saying the speech that he writes at the end.
Yeah.
You're getting like flashes of the school and stuff, and within those flashes you get two important things. One, you get a blown up locker.
Yes.
And two, there is a picture of the Man of the Year, 1969.
Yeah.
Which is the janitor.
Yes.
So you get
who is one of the few really likable people in this movie. Like genuinely good, Yeah. I kind of feel like him and Brian are like the ones that are like,
Well, I think they're all good kids.
They are all. Well, I mean,
Bender's a good kid, really. He's just so
Bender,
fucked up by his parents.
Yes, it's as the movie progresses, sure. Yeah. But he does enter a room and almost immediately say, "Hey, why don't we gang rape this woman?"
Yes.
And it's like, shit, dude. Like, you're going to struggle to win me back over from this. I mean, luckily the film is well enough written to where you do, and you understand, like, he's saying stuff for a reaction, and he's trying to, well, we'll get into it. But one of my favorite scenes of the movie actually is this scene. I really love the introduction as we see everyone's parents and how they treat their kids, and this is the reason they are who they are. We see we see each of them.
We start with Claire.
Yes.
And she's, terribly disappointed that she has to spend her Saturday there.
Yeah.
And she's, it's not like I'm defective or anything. And like her dad says, well, you're not defective because you ditched school to go shopping. And you think,
yeah,
wow, that's like the perfect cliche for the rich kid, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so, they goes off, and he's just smiling at her, isn't he? He's, very dismissive, and he just lets her go.
Yeah.
And then you get Brian, who's, his mother's telling him that he's got to find a way to study.
Because he's like, we don't study. We've got to sit there in silence. And she's like, you will find a way to study, young man.
Yeah.
It's like, oh god.
And his little sister goes, yeah.
Oh, that's such a little sister thing to do, though.
And that actually is his mum and his little sister as well.
Oh, really? That's really cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's his real parents. So we get, and I think we get Brian. Sorry, not Brian.
Andy. Yeah, who his dad's basically like, hey, I used to fool around as well, but you got caught. That's your problem. You got caught.
Yeah, he doesn't give a fuck what he did.
No.
He's just pissed off that his son.
I mean, you feel like he could have, like, well, I mean, he did assault someone, but you feel like he could have, like, almost beaten someone to death. But as long as he didn't get caught, his dad wouldn't have cared.
No.
He's only worried about his potential scholarship, and he's a wrestler, and this is his kind of chance. And he's like, hey, they're never going to take no university's going to take on a
discipline case.
A discipline case. That's the word. Yeah. And that's all he cares about.
Yeah. And then we get Bender walking in,
just walking in by himself. Yeah.
Nearly gets run over by
Alison's parents.
Alison's parents. Yeah. And I mean, we don't even see Alison's parents.
No.
They're just hazy figures in the
which is very intentional. As the film goes on, we will see that that's exactly what they are.
She leans over to sort of, like, I guess, say goodbye, and the car just pulls away without any interaction whatsoever.
Yeah. So one by one, they kind of enter the room.
Yeah, Bender's just knocking shit over and stealing stuff.
Yeah, just immediately he's just being an asshole, like, the second he walks in. And this is where we're introduced to Mr. Vernon, right? I think.
Yeah.
And he's just like you're all. Yeah. The disdain is, like, palpable.
Yeah, you do
Um,
really do wonder how this guy ever became a teacher. I mean, the thing is,
well, the janitor later explains pretty
well,
much
he
how.
does.
Yeah.
He does. And I think that, I don't know whether you did, but there were teachers in my school that were like that as well. So
Yeah, actually,
I'm sure
funny
most
enough.
schools have got at least one teacher that's just this asshole.
Yeah.
That really doesn't like kids. He's just there because it's a job that he took.
Yeah.
Because he thought he could, it would be easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So he basically tells them all off. He just basically gives them shit immediately.
You won't talk. You won't move from these seats.
I love that because Brian's just about to change. He's only changing a seat as well. He's not doing anything wrong. He's just literally wants to move to a different seat, and he's like, "You will not move from your seat." He's like, "Oh, okay."
And I love that he's like, "You will write this." He tells them that they're gonna write this essay on who they are, and Brian gets up and says, If that's, I can answer that right now, sir. I really don't want to be here again. He's like, sit down, for like, fuck's sake, dude. Poor Brian's got no social graces at all, has he?
No, and he says it has to be a minimum of 1,000 words, and that is not the same word repeated 1,000 times. They have to actually write something. And you go to Bender,
and he's got that look at, he's got that.
He's done it, yeah.
Where he looks under his lids and smiles. That crafty smile of his.
Him and Mr. Vernon have clearly done this dance many times prior to this day.
He's mouthing the words.
Yeah, he literally knows exactly all of the phrases. He's
feel.
Yeah. So yeah, he buggers off, and then I think Bender's almost immediately like talking about pissing on the floor because he wants to go to the toilet.
He wants. Yep. What do we do if I have got to take a whiz? I suppose about just whip it right out. And of course,
Andy's like,
if you whip it out, I'm gonna waste you before the first drop touches the ground.
Yeah.
And that is such a kid thing to say as well, isn't it? It's that whole later on when he says, it's 2 hits, me hitting you, you hitting the floor.
Yeah. Such 80s tough guy. Oh, it's great. I mean, immediately Bender is he just seems like a total scumbag. Like I said, he suggests that they basically have gang rape Claire. And
close the door and get the prom queen impregnated.
Yeah. And obviously, we later sort of realize he's saying these things to get a rise out of people and to get a reaction. But obviously the reaction 100%. Obviously Claire is disgusted by this, but Andy, being the jock, the I guess he probably sees himself as the chivalrous man. He's like, immediately he's gonna get involved, and he rises to it, and him and they all have their moments of kind of conflicting personalities, but I think the biggest is probably Andy and Bender. It's fun though. I like the way the relationship's played because it would be very easy to make all of these characters just hate each other in every single scene, and that's all it is. But you almost immediately see them covering for each other. You see them laughing at each other's jokes, even if they don't like each other. They're like, "Oh, that was actually quite funny." Like they have those moments. It's very human. It's not one note. These relationships.
Somebody says something, and they react to it. It's a natural gut reaction that they have.
Yeah.
And again, you never saw that in these movies. You never saw that sort of that amount of realism in a conversation with teenagers.
Yeah. And of course Andy basically is like, "Hey, you're just a fucking loser."
Yeah.
And
if you were to disappear, no one would give a shit.
Yeah. And of course, Bender then makes fun of him wearing tights to wrestle.
And I love Brian's.
I know Brian's is so innocent in this movie. He's just like,
wear tights. It's like, I wear the required uniform, and he says tights.
Yeah, this is what you wear, buddy. And then of course he gets up and Bender gets up and rigs the door so that it closes.
Yeah, he takes the screw out. So this is one of the things that I didn't think about this until like later.
It's a fire door and should probably be closed anyway.
It's a fire door. But what always gets me is he's in the office across the way, which
He's
is
not far.
I presume it's his office sort of thing.
I'm guessing so.
But at the front of the classroom, there is a glass office.
I know, he could have just used the... Yeah,
Why
absolutely.
you wouldn't sit there? I mean, I guess you don't really want to sit there, but usually, I mean, I don't know whether you ever did detention.
A couple of times.
I certainly did, yeah.
Yeah.
And my teacher never left the room.
No, they were in the room with you, staring awkwardly at you while you sat.
I mean, I suppose it's the conceit that the movie has is that he doesn't care. He doesn't want.
It would be a much more boring movie if he was sat there staring at them for. And also, by the way, it should be pointed out that, like, you know, I don't know how it is in the States. In the UK, your detention is like a couple of hours, hour max. Yeah, this is 9 hours on a Saturday. Yeah, it's not even like
a Saturday detention. That's one. That's definitely.
But 9 hours.
Yeah.
How long's a fucking school day? Like that's like it's like 9 till 3:30 usually in the UK, or it used to be. 9 hours. That's ridiculous. But anyway, that's what they're doing. And so Bender takes a screw out of the door so that the door closes itself. And of course, the Mr. Vernon hears a commotion, and he kind of rounds the corner and finds the door closed.
What the hell happened to the door? And of course, you know,
but like Bender's reaction's great. He's like, "How would we know? We're not allowed to get up."
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, we're not allowed to leave our seats. And it's the first, you know, the first time Claire sticks up for him, and she's like,
"This is the scene where I was like, oh, this is great, because they're actually, it's still like, it's like, I hate you."
Yeah,
you're one of us. You're still a kid, and you're not the fucking teacher. So
it's totally kids against the teacher. Mm-hmm. And she says, "Why would anybody want to remove a screw?"
Yeah.
You know, and then
and when Bender's saying cocky things to the teacher, Andy does laugh. He smirks. He's like, he finds it funny.
They all smirk, and Alison at the back hasn't said a single word yet. She just makes the odd squeak.
Yes, because he demands that she tell him, and she just squeaks and hides, and then I think it's Bender that's like, she doesn't talk.
She doesn't talk, sir.
And then of course he gets Andy to try it. Oh no! First he tries the chair.
He tries the chair first,
and Bender's like, the door's far too heavy for that, sir.
Yeah, and
they all have a good laugh at that when that fails. But then of course he enlists Andy to put
There's also that line where he says about what's it? I can't remember what the trigger is now. But they say something, and Bender says, "You show Dick some respect."
Oh, it's when Brian points out that there's fire exits at either side of the hall, because he was saying, I think Bender said, "Hey, that needs to be," because he enlists Andy's help to use a magazine rack to keep the door open. But then Bender's like, "Hey, that's a fire risk. You don't want a fire risk,
endangering the lives of children."
And then Brian's like, "Actually, there's fire exit doors," and Bender's like, "You respect Dick." It's good. By the way, I find it really refreshing, particularly for a movie of the 80s. For all of the nerdy things that Brian is as a character, he's not like the stereotypical nerd. Like it would have been so easy for them to give him glasses and to, you know, like a dorky haircut, and he doesn't really look like that. He looks, I mean, he's dressed like a bit of a nerd. He's
got terrible clothes,
but that's about it.
You know, and he looks like a nerd.
Well, he's skinny,
as in that he's skinny and he's a bit gawky. And,
yeah.
And I mean, to be fair, in the 80s, if you looked anything like that,
oh god, yeah, you'd be bullied.
You were a nerd.
I mean, I was bullied.
You know.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah.
Of course, Vernon blames Andy for you know, I expected more
like,
of our city.
Put that back. What are you doing? It's like it was your idea, you dick.
So they move it back, and then of course he starts talking about, you know, don't mess with the pool, young man, you'll get the horns.
Yeah. Yeah. Is this where Bender is having a go at the where he's like basically like you got another week's detention and he just keeps going and going and goading him into more and more days.
Yeah.
And I love the bit when he's like, how many is that now? And Brian's like, oh, it's
a
seven.
Including the time at the beginning when he said, do you raid Barry Manilow's wardrobe?
Yeah. Yeah. And then the Mr. Verner's like, so that's 8 times. And Brian's like, oh, it's 7.
There are 7.
He's like, shut up, Brian.
He says, shut up. He calls him, shut up, Pee-wee, he says.
Something like that, yeah.
And of course, Bender is just completely in, like, blinkered attack mode.
Yeah.
And he's, going for it. And
well, as we will find out later, it's in his best interest to not be home anyway. So
yes.
This is what he wants.
And Claire actually
tells him to stop. She's like, what are you doing?
Stop. She says, stop. And he looks at her I've always interpreted that look he gives her as complete confusion.
Yeah. Like, why are you trying to help?
Why she would say something.
Yeah.
Why? What's going on? Why are you trying to talk? What is this? And she says, stop. Don't. And of course he says, have you finished? And he says, not even close, bud. And he says about, I've got you for your natural life, your whole natural life.
Yeah.
And I love, again, there's this really nice thing with the music here as well, that the way the guitars build as he's, getting angrier and angrier. And of course, when he leaves the room, there's that moment where he goes, fuck you!
Yeah.
And the music just completely rises over the top. It's like really, really cool.
It's good. It is really good. And then I think we get do we get the scene where they're all really bored and Bender's ripping pages out of the book?
But first of all, you get them all falling asleep, don't you?
And then Mr. Verner comes in. He's like, "Who needs the toilet?" And they all put their hands up.
They're all like crashed out. They're all, they've got that. They're all doing. First of all, they're all doing their little things. It's like Andy's doing a sort of like a football thing with a piece of paper, and Bender's playing guitar and lighting cigarettes with his boots.
Isn't he like setting fire to his boots as well at one point, or is that later? I think he's like literally setting fire to his boots.
Yeah, he's got the match in basically in the sole, and he pulls his
is that what he's doing?
Up to light his cigarette, and then he puts it out with his hand. Alison is drawing that picture, that really cool picture of a bridge.
Yeah,
with snow,
mm-hmm.
And then to which she empties her dandruff onto it to make it look like it's snowing, which is brilliant. That's apparently Parmesan cheese,
right?
Not real dandruff. And you get her. She's wrapping twine round her finger and just pushing the tip. And I love just the little stupid things that they're doing,
mm-hmm.
To
pass the time,
get away some of the boredom. And of course, they're all like slowly falling asleep. And then Vernon comes in and says, "Who needs to use the toilet?" And they'll put their hands up. They basically it's lunch. Yeah, it's lunch, isn't it?
Well, I think we get the page ripping and then it's lunch. Yeah. So he's like, we're going to do lunch, and then isn't Andy like, I think the school cafeteria would be a much better place for us to food, and he's just like, shut up and go get drinks. He sends Andy and Alison, doesn't he?
That's it, yeah. Because Claire said, I have a real penchant for dehydration, and he's like, I've seen it, it's pretty gross. Yeah, and when he says, who's going, he's like, and they're all like pointing at Claire, like, because he wants Claire to go with him, and of course he doesn't. He chooses Alison.
Yeah.
Who at first doesn't even register she's being talked to. She's just like looking off in the distance somewhere.
Yeah.
He's like, wake up! And she's like, oh, he's actually talking to me. Someone's talking to me.
So they head off, and in the hallway they kind of have a bit of a chat.
He says, what's your poison? And she says, vodka. It's like, when do you drink vodka? It's like, I drink tons of it all the time. It's like, all right then. And then she says about why he's there. No, he says, "Why are you here?" And she says, "Why are you here?" And he says, "Oh well, my coach doesn't want me to blow my ride because I'm not in control of my life and all that." He gives this big spiel about being a racehorse.
Yeah.
And he's built for speed and all that stuff, and she's just like, yeah, that's really good, Sporto. Now why are you really here?
And as we will see later, Alison is a compulsive liar, and you can't bullshit a bullshitter. No. She immediately sees through it and is like, nada. Like, no.
I think so.
That's my job. What are you really here for?
She's also a klepto.
Yes.
There's actually a scene. So when they're in the when they're getting the drinks, and Bender throws the drink to her, and she catches it, and she's reading the back of a Prince album.
Yeah.
There's a scene that's missing where when they raid a teacher's locker, and that album's in there, and I think that there's a joke about, oh my god, they're actually a bit like us. Are teachers real people, sort of thing? And of course, then she steals the record, basically.
Right.
So yeah, while they're off getting the drinks, Bender's sat there ripping up a Moliere book.
Yeah. And him and Claire are kind of, they're hating each other, but at the same time, there's definitely something. There's some chemistry.
Yeah, when he mispronounces the name, I don't think she has a laugh that's taking the piss out of him. I think her smile is weirdly that she found it cute. That
yes,
he's a bit of an idiot.
Yeah.
And of course, Brian's like, "I love his work." She just throws the pieces of the book at
him. So I'm gonna struggle to remember the order of things here.
Yeah, I mean, even though I've seen it shitloads of times, there's always gonna be bits.
But I think the next scene is the lunch scene, where we get to see what everyone's eating. I absolutely love the. So Claire's got sushi.
Yeah.
And we get this great back and forth between her and Bender, where she explains what sushi is, and he's just disgusted by it.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Can I just eat?" And he's like, "I don't know. Give it a try."
Give it a try, yeah. And he says, you won't accept a guy's tongue in your mouth, but you'll eat that.
Yeah. And what I love is when we then see Andy next to her, and he's getting all of this food out comically, loads of food. He's a big wrestler jock, and he needs his protein and whatever. But what I love is just before that, I don't know if you get this, but to me, I find it really cute because it looks like Molly Ringwald has never used chopsticks in her life. It's like she just doesn't know what to do because she tries and fails to pick it up a few times and just kind of says, "Oh fuck."
Yeah.
But yeah, then of course we see Andy getting out mountains of food.
Yeah. And it's even I love the way that it's like just when you think he's done, now he pulls out some more.
It's like a banana and an apple in the bottom.
And they're all just sat there watching, like just pulling out all this shit. Of course, Bender doesn't have any lunch.
Of course not. But then of course they're distracted from Andy by Alison, who is just. I don't know what she's doing. She throws.
She's got two pieces of bread, and
because she throws the meat out.
She throws the lunch meat out, and it ends up on the top of the statue that's behind them.
Yeah.
And then apparently they're pixie sticks.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure what that is.
It looks like sugar to me.
It's which I'm guessing is like a sherbet or something, or
okay,
sugar, maybe. But I think it's just like sugar.
So she makes a sandwich of
Captain Crunch.
Yeah, Captain Crunch sugar. In a sandwich, and then Coke.
Yeah, and she's already, because her can was shaken up, spilled everywhere, and she's just drank it off the desk already.
Yeah,
so she's definitely, unique.
Yeah. Well, that's one way of putting it.
The expression on their face when she turns around, that she looks up and sees them all staring at her, and she just takes this big. Crunchy bite out of this awful looking sandwich.
Yeah.
And then we go to Brian,
who's got lunch until Bender turns up.
Yeah, he's got the most the most nutritious lunch there is. Like, takes that out of the flask. It's like, that's got soup in it. And it's, I like the apple juice is like, I can read. It's like,
Yeah. And then I think Andy.
Well, Brian, he then says, Bender basically then does the my impression of what life is like in Bry's house.
Yeah, because don't Andy and Bender have a bit of a to and fro, and then Brian gets involved, and he's like, "Hey, I hate my parents too," and Bender's like, "Well, let me do an impression of your family," because he's like, "You're like a parent's wet dream. You're like exactly what parents want. Like you're the nerd. You're educated."
The neo maxi zoomy dweeby.
That's such a great phrase.
Yeah, which apparently Nelson made up himself. So
it's pretty good. I like it.
I was like, it doesn't mean anything, but it perfectly means what you think it means, isn't it? It's like,
in the context of the scene, it works.
Yeah.
So he does this mocking impression of his parents, of Brian's parents, and then Andy's like, "Well, show us your parents. What are your parents like?"
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Bender basically shows a very abusive relationship.
Dad calling him a useless, worthless,
and physical violence as well.
Yep, and his mum steps in and she gets hit.
Yeah.
And of course, Brian's like, "Yeah, bullshit. I don't fucking believe any of it."
It's Andy, isn't it? Andy.
He's talking out of his ass.
And he freaks out because it obviously was real, and he shows him like a cigar burn, right?
Yeah, a cigar burn. He says, "This is what you get in my house for spilling paint in the garage."
Mm.
And he says, "I don't think I need to sit with you dildos anymore."
And he goes up on the steps, doesn't he? But you can see he's very hurt by this. He's actually upset. You can see in his eyes he's upset. Claire chastises Andy, who's like, "How was I supposed to know?"
Yeah.
And to be fair, from what Andy has seen of Bender up to this point, there was probably no reason to believe anything he was saying.
No, absolutely not.
Bender's kind of awkward in that way, that he's been an asshole this whole time, and now he's decided for once to tell the truth and be honest about something, and people have rightly gone, "No, you're full of shit."
Yeah.
You're always full of shit. But yes, so do we...
We did miss that there was the little scuffle as well, which was before that, which was the scuffle between him and Brian. No,
Andy.
Him and Andy.
Yeah, because Andy takes him down with like a wrestling hold.
Yeah, he literally just takes him down straight away, and Bender gets up and says, "I don't want to get in this just because I'll kill you." And he says, "All right." He says, "I'll kill you, and your parents would sue me." And of course, then he takes out the switchblade, and he sticks it in that chair, and Allison just steals it.
Yeah,
and you never see that switchblade again. It's like,
no,
that's gone. He's not going to see that again.
Yeah. I'm trying to think whether I can't remember where this happens, so I'll just chuck it in here. We get a really, I think, quite a nice scene with Bender making fun of Brian and saying like, "Oh, you've never had sex," and Brian's like, "Oh, I've had sex. My girlfriend lives in Canada," and
that's a little later, but yes, it's round around this point. It doesn't really matter, does it? Yeah, he says, you wouldn't know her. She lives in Canada. He's like, really? And he says, and of course he starts
mouthing at Bender to says, be quiet because of Alice.
Have you done anybody around?
Because of Claire, sorry.
He says, "Have you done anybody around here?" And he's like, "Shh, don't want to talk about it."
Yeah.
And of course, Bender then implies that him and Claire have done it, and of course, Claire is completely incensed by this, and she's like, "You little pig."
And Brian's just like, "No, I just didn't want you to know I was a virgin. Like, I just didn't. I was telling him to shut up."
I love that. I love it when he says, "It's my own personal business," and Bender says, "Doesn't sound like you're doing any business."
Well, I think it's quite a sweet scene, and it kind of shows that Brian is
Well, she said,
and she's nice about it. Yeah, she's like,
she says, "I don't think it's wrong for a guy to be a virgin. Why not?" And of course, Bender looks at her like, "Are you fucking mental? What's happening here? Why?"
Yeah. Well, and of course, Bender, I think prior to this, has already insinuated that Claire's a virgin as well. So
you do get that horrible scene where he's
gross. He's pretty
talking
gross
about
early on in this. He's
has been, out late at night on a school night, all the panties bunched and all that sort of stuff, and it's like, yeah, but Claire's reaction is really like, even though she's shocked, there is definitely something there. You can see
there
that.
Is, I would say I will say, because I think like the least kind of the thing I buy the least about this movie is Andy and Allison. But Claire and Bender definitely have something early on.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's definitely chemistry between the two of them.
Yeah. I think the Andy and Allison.
It just kind of felt like the writers were like, "Oh, he needs to end up with someone."
Well,
they're fine.
Yeah, and I think their interaction works really well later when they're talking when she opens her purse.
That's true. True.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to it shortly.
We also missed the Carl coming in, the janitor.
Oh, Carl, the best character in this film.
And Carl comes in, he's emptying bins and stuff, and Bender says, Andy wants to know how you go about being a janitor, and of course he's taking the piss out of him, and he says, "What, do you think I'm like some untouchable serf or peasant? Because you don't know this, but I listen to your conversations. I go through your lockers," and Bender's face when he says, "I go through your lockers."
Well, of course we know what's in Bender's locker as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, but then he does smile when he sort of carries on going. He's like, yeah, I know I am the eyes and ears of this
yeah,
my friends. And he says, by the way, that clock's 20 minutes fast. And they're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, so you've got even longer. So yes, I think it might be time to actually find out what is in Bender's locker. As he decides it's time to sneak out.
Mm.
And I love how
we did miss when they're doing the board bit. They're all whistling Colonel Bogey, which is brilliant.
Yes, yeah, and again, it's great because they all join in.
Who clearly can't whistle, but bless her.
Yeah. So they reluctantly, because I think Bender goes, and then Claire's like, "I'm going with you," and then Brian's like, "Oh, okay, I guess I'll go with you," and then Andy's like the one of the last. He's like, "Oh, for fuck!" Like, okay, fine, screw it, and then of course Allison just follows because there's no one else left at that point.
And you get that bit where with Vernon, he's like walking around the corridors.
Yeah, Vernon, by the way, is having just as shit of a day. He like pours coffee all over his food. Is like, you can tell he's bored as well because he's made some kind of like
pencil
structure,
spinning contraption thing. Which is really cool actually. But there's a bit where he's walking in the corridors, and I think it's like a hose cover for like a fire hose cover.
Yeah.
And he's looking at it and he's there going hoo-ha and stuff. It's like, Jesus Christ, dude.
But yeah, so they get to Bender's locker and they
like guillotine contraption.
Yeah, and then initially they mock him for how messy it is. Until
this is my mate's on holiday.
Yeah, my mate's on holiday, and of course he reveals that he's got a massive bag of marijuana.
Yeah.
Which Brian is like mind blown by.
Do you approve of this? Can you believe that he's got marijuana?
Brian's just like, his brain has just exploded.
No, I mean there's that bit just before that as well when they're walking along the corridor and Brian just going to Andy, I'll ask him, where are we going? Do you know what we're doing? Why are we doing this? And Andy just goes, if you ask me another question, I'm punching shit out of you.
Yeah. So they then are aware that Mr. Vernon is basically walking the corridors and is coming back. So he's going back and is going to discover they're not there.
Yeah.
So they all
basically.
He's like Jason Voorhees in this scene. They run and wherever they go, he's just walking and appears like.
Yeah.
But it's a really funny scene.
The layout of this bloody school must be labyrinthine.
Yeah. But it's a great scene and it's really fun. And of course we see that the group choose Andy over Bender at this point.
Yeah.
Bender's like, we need to go this way. And Andy's like, shut up, we're done with you.
Through the food court, and Andy says, no, we need to go for activities.
Yeah. But they soon discover that activities is actually gated off.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we're screwed.
That's it, we're fucked.
But Bender says, no, you're not.
And Bender, he looks at Claire.
He does. You can tell at this point he's thinking about Claire.
Yeah, he looks at Claire and he says, no, just me. And he puts this massive roll of dope in Brian's trousers.
Yeah.
He says, hey, look after my dupage.
Yeah, and then he runs off and starts making as much noise as he can.
Yes, singing the drill instructor song. Sorry, the Airborne Ranger song, which I don't know whether you probably know was the main tune to Green Beret on the Commodore 64.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Which still to this day haunts my dreams.
I like Green Beret.
Oh, it's a great game.
Oh, I thought you meant the game haunts your dreams. Sorry.
Oh no, that tune does.
The tune, yeah, okay.
the really bad.
I love me some Sid chip music, but that's not the best one.
Version.
But yeah, so he runs, and that obviously gives the rest of the guys time to get to the hall. Yeah. And of course, Mr. Vernon's chasing after him. He can hear the noise, but he can't quite figure out where he is.
Yeah, it's ripping down posters and things.
Yeah, just smashing lockers, just causing as much noise as possible. And of course, he finds him in the basketball hall.
Yeah,
where he's actually playing basketball. He's like, I'm going to try it for the team.
Yeah, he's taken off one of his shoes. He's got got a one trainer on that he's obviously just found there. And he says, don't you want to hear my excuse? He's like, I'm going to try it for a scholarship.
Yeah.
And I love that bit where he's like goes to throw the ball, and he's like, and Vernon flinches, but then he just rolls it towards him.
Yeah.
Vernon kicks it back. And then he just grabs him and carries him off. And of course, they're all sort of sat in their places when he gets back.
Yes, yeah.
And then that's when we discover what it is that he did to get there. And he says, pulling fire alarms it's really good, isn't it? Because he says, what if your house is on fire? What if your dope was on fire? And he says, impossible, sir. It's in Johnson's pants.
That was such a good line.
And of course, he says about you go and see him when he's in 30 years' time. You see how much of a funny guy he is then. And he's really fucking cruel.
Oh no, he is. Bender is a little shit.
Yeah.
But Jesus Christ, Mr. Vernon is just a horrible person.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see more of how horrible he actually is a little later.
He takes him off and he puts him in that I don't know, like a supply closet or something.
Yeah.
It's piled up with chairs and things. And he basically says to him, you think you're tough? He goes, come on, hit me.
Yeah, he basically says let's have a fight right now.
Yeah.
And he's like, even closes his eyes, like, go on, punch me.
Yeah, and he says, you think because just give me an excuse. He says, you think anybody's going to believe you? He says, you're a gutless turd. He says, I'm a swell guy. No one's going to believe you.
You are not a swell guy.
Yeah, no, you really are not.
You really are not.
So, yeah, he literally goes, and there was genuine fear in.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's pretty intimidating. He's got backed into a corner, and he's got a point with Bender's presumable history.
Mm.
He's right. No one's going to believe him. If Mr. Vernon decided to assault him, no one would believe him.
Nope.
So he is right, unfortunately.
He got a fucking juvie record and all sorts.
Yeah, exactly. So he's got a point, unfortunately.
Mm. Again, I think we're going to mess up the order, but I think there's the bit where
Did we miss the bit in the basement? Has that already happened?
Yeah, I think the bit in the basement where
I couldn't place where that happens, but he's going through the personal files, isn't he?
Personal files, yeah,
and he gets caught by Carl.
Somebody who's got a history of slight mental illness.
Because it's the teacher's files, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's on his like colleagues. He's looking through the colleagues' files.
Yeah.
And the janitor catches him,
Yeah.
and
what you're doing. He says, well, this is sensible material, sensitive material, and but someone with my reputation, he says, what are you going to do for me? He's like, well, what do you mean? He says, 50 bucks. 50 bucks.
But then after that as well, which is why I think Carl is my favorite character in this movie, he then is like, hey, you're
yeah, they're having beers, aren't they? He's like, there's not like a pile of empty cans around them at this point. And he says, Vernon starts going on about how these kids turned on him.
Arrogant and disrespectful of authority.
Yeah, they turned on him. They he used to love this job, and now it's terrible. And he says that the thing that keeps me up at night is these kids. They're gonna be the ones that look after me when I'm old. And Carl just goes, I don't think so.
Yeah,
I wouldn't count on it.
No.
And he says, Carl says, well, no, because you took this job because you thought it'd be easy. You get like 6 months off or whatever, 3 months off a year. Because you get all this time because you thought it would just be a breeze. Because when you actually found out that it was going to be hard work, this is what you found yourself.
Yeah.
These kids didn't change. You did.
You did. Yeah. You're the one that changed.
He says, what do you think 16-year-old you would think of you?
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyway, back in the present, Bender, escapes through the ceiling.
Yeah.
And, we get shot. I love the shot of him going through.
Saying a joke that doesn't have a punchline.
No, well, I guess the punchline is him falling through the roof. Ultimately,
but it was they never came up with a punchline for the joke.
I guess it's quite funny because they never needed one. They were like, well, it's never gonna, But yeah, so he's crawling through and he comes crashing down. There's this massive noise, and I love he just cool as shit just comes down the stairs like. I forgot my pen. Was it pencil or something like that? Was it? He's like, I forgot my pencil. And then of course he has to hide under the table because Vernon comes back in. And it's like, what the fuck was that? Like,
what was that ruckus? And he's like, can you describe the ruckus, sir?
Now at this point, Bender's hiding under the table. And basically, like, well, pretty much assaults Claire while she's trying to defend him, and he's just like making things way more difficult than he needs to for.
He puts his head between her legs. We don't know exactly what he does because
it's implied, heavily implied.
Yes,
that's
not
heavily implied.
Her legs. That's no.
I mean, I'm talking purely from the situation.
Yeah. And I can understand why people would be upset by this. It's an upset thing, but again, it's what an idiot teenager would do.
Oh yeah, no, it's all in keeping with what an idiot teenager especially with the kind of issues that Bender's got at this point in his life.
He certainly doesn't have fucking boundaries.
But it's not only is it a gross thing to do, but he does it at a time when she's literally trying to defend him against Vernon and hide him and trying to help him. She's trying to talk to the teacher to like get rid of him.
She basically crushes his head with her knees.
Yeah.
Vernon eventually goes away and she slaps him and calls him a pig, I think.
And then they smoke some weed. Which is when the group really get to
except for Alison. Alison doesn't.
No, sorry, yes, Alison doesn't. I've always been really confused because I know I've never really smoked weed. I know a lot of people that have. None of them act like Andy does, who I think is on fucking speed or something.
Somewhere else.
What the fuck is Andy on?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Andy's on speed. I've never seen anybody on dope.
No, he gets more active. Energetic. He goes crazy. It's like, well, dude.
Apparently, it's oregano they're smoking, but
yeah.
And it's the one I think scene that Hughes dislikes is the breaking of the window.
Oh, really?
Hotbox.
It is a bit like
it is a bit odd, but I think it's a sort of because it's the language lab, and I think it's supposed to be like a breaking the language barrier type thing.
I
I
yeah.
think it's supposed to be that, and it's a little. It's one of the. It is a choice that you think, okay, that is a bit odd.
Yeah,
But it's kind of sweet as well. It's kind of sort of,
it's a little on the nose, but yeah.
But yeah.
But yeah, so they
And Brian's starts.
He's got like Andy's glasses on, hasn't he? And he's like,
no, it's Bender's. He's got Bender's sunnies on.
Oh, is it Bender's sunny? Sorry.
Yeah, because when Bender goes, he's taken away.
That's right. Yeah.
He puts the sunglasses in front of Andy and says, "For better hallway vision."
Yeah.
And he starts riffing on. It's actually a Richard Pryor stand-up thing. I didn't know that until later. I just because he does a similar thing in Weird Science.
Mm-hmm.
He does when they're in the club in Weird Science. He does this sort of weird black guy impression.
Yeah.
But apparently it's a Richard Pryor thing, which it's from oh no, I'm going to forget the name of the bloody stand-up routine. I can't remember what it is, but I have seen that particular one, but I did not remember that was what it was from.
Yeah.
And of course, Claire's talking about how popular she is, and everybody loves me and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of buy that. That's fine.
Yeah.
And then you get the bit where Andy and Brian are going through stuff, and he's got his fake ID. He's got Brian's fake ID.
I love the fake ID. Is so bad.
He says, "You realise you made yourself 60? Was it 65 or something?"
Yeah.
And he says, "Why have you got a fake ID anyway?" And he says, "So I can vote."
Yeah, I love that. It's such an honest answer as well. That's just amazing.
And then, of course, Alison, he says, "Do you have a middle name?" And Alison turns up in her sort of like little quirky, in her like little sort of quirky way that she sort of holds herself, and says it's Ralph, as in puke.
Yeah.
And then she gives him his social security number. And it's like, what? It's like, how do you know that? He says, because I stole.
Are you psychic? Doesn't he think she's psychic or something?
Yeah, are you psychic? And he's like, no, I stole your wallet.
Yeah, this is where
and he's like, he's got a nudie picture in there, and he's going, cool, let's have a look.
Yeah, and they start kind of telling their true stories of how they got there.
Yeah, and she says, "Do you want to see what's in my bag?"
Yeah,
and they're like,
it's like everything. In the world.
No, really, and she just empties it out. And I think this is one of the things about her character is that she's clearly got all these, barriers that she puts up. She keeps her to herself. She doesn't talk to anything. She's obviously, weird and quirky and all that sort of stuff, which is, obviously a defense thing. But she's eager. She does want them to know. She wants them to know about her.
Yes.
But then, of course, as soon as she does, she completely regrets it.
Which Andy points out. He's like, you started this. Like you said, you wanted to show us this stuff, and then you're then complaining when we react to it. It's like you asked for this.
She talks about how she could. He says, "Do you always carry this much stuff?" And she says, "Yeah, I carry all this." She says, "You never know when you want to jam. You have to jam." And she says, "I could go to anywhere, Afghanistan, or and Brian's like, are you going to be one of those bag ladies, those shopping cart ladies?"
Yeah.
And she's like, fuck you guys. I'm going, doesn't matter. And it's like, well, you emptied your stuff out. And he's like, no, fuck it. And she goes off. And again, see, this interaction is really good because Brian, fucking hell, do I keep saying Brian? Andy goes over and he's actually really sensitive about it.
Yeah, he is. He is actually really nice.
And he sort of just stands there. He takes his time with her. He doesn't sort of, push anything. He just says, what is it? Is it your parents? And she says, yeah. And he says, yeah. And he says, what do they do to you? And she says, they ignore me.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most heartbreaking things is when she says, they ignore me, and you just think, fuck.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Which again we saw at the start.
Yeah.
You don't even see her parents, as and
yeah, they're literally just shadows in the car that
yeah.
you barely see.
Yeah, it's a very purposely directed scene.
Yeah.
And we start getting those stories. We get Andy's story that he'd humiliated this kid by taping his buttocks in the gym to impress his father, who is a complete fucking tyrant.
He says, his dad tells him these stories about what they get up to, what he got up to all the time, and he tells him about, all the stuff they've done, and he sort of thought, well, I haven't done any of that. I haven't,
Yeah, so he wanted to impress his dad.
Yeah, he felt the need to do, what his dad has told him that he did all these years.
And his dad would have loved it had he not been caught.
Exactly.
That's the thing. And then we get a really, disturbing story from Brian, who.
Well, you get the sort of there's a sort of a rambly thing, wasn't it? That they go that it goes in and out of what they're.
It kind of weaves between them and
the sort of. I don't remember what bloody order they.
I couldn't remember, so I was just going to go through them I know that it's Brian's one that really kind of breaks the ice because they start laughing at the end of it.
Well, there's a.
Well, of course, Claire's got like marriage issues with her parents, and she basically feels that they're playing one off against the other and trying to use her to get to the other person.
Yeah, you get that quite early. Near the beginning, which we missed that, and when Bender says, "Who do you prefer?" and she's like, "Well, they both use me. I don't think either of them really gives a shit about me," and of course, she's being all self-pitying, and Alison just goes, "Ha!"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Who the hell are you? Like, what?" And of course, Bender's like really happy about that. He's like really smiling about the interruption that Alison gives.
Yeah.
It's like the first proper interaction that Alison does.
It is really, yeah. But yeah, so we learned that Brian's been feeling suicidal. Because he's failed a project, and to him, that's his world, right? That's all he does is get A's, and he's amazing. Due to the way he's been brought up,
he pisses off Bender because he says, I thought the best way to maintain my average was to take shop.
Yeah.
And Bender's like, why the fuck would you take shop? And he's like, have you seen the dummies that take shop? And he's like, I take shop. And it's like, uh-oh. And he's like, it was to make an elephant lamp. And you pull the trunk, the light's supposed to go on, but I couldn't get it to work. And, of course, Bender's like, well, you must be a genius. What? Because I can't work out a lamp. He's like, then they go on about trigonometry. He's like, without this, you wouldn't get this. It's like, without lamps, there'd be no light. And of course, Claire says, hey, neither of you are right here. It's let's just step back, sort of thing. And then I think you get like a little break from his story, don't you?
Yeah, I think that might be when Andy starts talking about his, because he attacked a friend of Brian's, right? Is the kid that he taped. But it eventually comes back to him, and Brian basically says that he bought a gun to school because he was going to kill himself for failing this project. Because the way his parents have brought him up, he's straight A student, he cannot possibly fail. It's not possible.
Even if he does whatever he can now, he can only finish with a B.
Yeah, and he basically
my parents can have that. I can't have that, and I know my parents can't have that.
Yeah. So he was gonna kill himself, and it's quite a dark story, and everyone's kind of serious about it. But then he says that the reason he ended up in detention.
He says what was it? He says what was it? A handgun, and he says
it was a flare gun. They went off in his locker and started a fire.
Yeah.
And of course they start laughing, and he's like, "That's not funny." And then of course he realizes that it is actually fucking funny. And then they all start laughing, and they all kind of share this moment. I love the way that it starts off in a really dark place, and then they find the humor in this horrendous story.
Yeah. And then the weird dance scene.
Yeah, and we get to see Bender starting to be a bit more soft. He's kind of developing a softer attitude. He's being more friendly and nice.
There is that bit where before that actually, whether he's when they're looking at each other's bags and things, and Claire's got all the Bender's going through Claire's bags, and Claire's looking at his wallet.
Yeah.
And he's got all these pictures of girls, and she says, "Are these your girlfriends?" And he says, "Some," and he's like, "Some?" He says, "Yeah, some are my girlfriends, and some I might consider being my girlfriends." And he's like, he's cleaning his teeth with her makeup brush.
Yeah.
And he says to her, "How come?" He says, "How come you've got so much shit?" And he says, "How come you've got so many girls?" He says, "No, because I asked you first." He says, "Well, I don't ever throw anything away." And he says, "I don't either." And she just goes, "Oh." And you also, so mixed in with this as well, you get there's a bit where they're talking about things that they can do. Oh, that's right. That's when the story starts getting a bit deep. Alison says that she can play.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
He says I can make spaghetti, and Brian says I can tape your buns together. Sorry, Andy says you can tape your buns together, and Alison says she can make spaghetti and play Heart and Soul on the piano with her feet. And there's like, "What can you do, Claire?" And Claire says she can't do anything, and they're like, "Yeah, you can. Everybody can do something." And he talks about Animal Planet, and so she does this trick where she puts the lipstick between her boobs and can apply lipstick in that fashion, which she actually can't do, but they make it look like she can do it. And of course, she says to Ben, "Promise you won't laugh." And of course, he doesn't laugh, but he does this dramatic clapping.
Yeah.
And then he talks about, did you pay for the money for the earrings, and did you do this? And of course, he's like being really nasty to her. And of course, Andy's like, "You said you wouldn't laugh." He's like, "I'm not laughing. Why am I laughing?" I'm just being honest with her, saying it as it is. And of course, she starts. He's just talking about She says about friends and stuff, and he says, "You don't talk to me about my friends. He says, you don't know anybody. You wouldn't condescend to talk to any of my friends."
Yeah.
He says, "Just stick to what you know. Your dad's BW and your prom and your poor drunk mother." She's just screaming, "I hate you" at him. And of course, Alison says, "Are we all gonna?" No, somebody says, "Are we gonna grow up to be like our parents?"
Yeah.
And Alison says, "It's inevitable. When you grow up, your heart dies." You think, Jesus Christ. And you do get that acknowledgement as well between Bender and Andy, when Andy's talking about his dad.
Yeah.
About how, win, fuck you. And he says about, "I wish my knee would give out." Bender says, "Your dad and my dad should go out bowling together."
But yeah, so ultimately, obviously Bender sneaks back into his closet before detention ends, and Claire spends a bit of time there making out with him.
Well, so he goes back, and they're all sat there, and Claire basically says to Brian, "Well, you're going to write your paper." And Brian's like, "Yeah, of course I'm going to write my paper." And she's like, "Well, I don't see why all of us should write our paper." It's really manipulative.
Yeah, it's manipulative as fuck. Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, I don't see why we should all write our paper, but we trust you. You write for all of us." And he's like, "Okay." So of course,
and of course, all he's wanted is acceptance from the start. So now she's manipulated him into this situation where he's like, "Hey, I'm useful. Look at me."
Well, actually, the thing we did forget was, Brian says just before that, Brian says, "Well, what's going to happen Monday?"
Yeah, are we even going to be friends?
I think of you all as my friends now, and Claire's like, "No, of course not. That's just not going to happen." And of course, Bender's like, calls her a bitch, and she's like, "Why?"
Oh, dude,
I'm being honest.
I just remembered one of my favorite lines that we missed from earlier, and it is probably my favorite line of the whole goddamn movie. Is really early on. really early on, there's there's a bit when Bender's giving Brian shit, and Andy's like, "Hey, don't talk to him like that. He's got a name," and he's like, "What's your name?" He's like, "See."
He says Brian, and he says my condolences.
Yeah, I love that scene. It's so good. Anyway, sorry, I just suddenly popped into my head. I love that.
No, there's loads of things we've forgotten. Like one of my favourite ones, which is I still use with my wife now, is the one where he puts his hand out with his finger pointing out upside down, and he says, "Can you hear?
Turn the volume. Yeah.
Do you want me to turn it up?" I still like to use that to my wife when we're messing about. So Brian says, are we going to be friends on Monday? And she says no, and Bender calls her a bitch. He's like, you know how shitty that is, and he's like, yeah, but I'm just being honest. It's like, Brian, if he talks to Andy Monday morning, he says, sure, you'll talk to him, and then you'll cut him up in front of your friends as soon as he walks away.
Yeah.
He says, how about you? Would you want to take him to one of your heavy metal vomit parties? Or, and they're all saying it's kind of true what they're saying.
She is just being honest about it. Like, yeah. I don't think she's being a bitch as much as she's just being really honest with them about the realities of school.
Exactly. And Brian says, what about you to Alison? What about you? And she says, what about your friends? And Alison says, I don't have any friends. And again, you just think, oh, Christ, Alison is really messed up, isn't she?
Yeah.
I mean, they're all messed up, but I think she's probably the most psychologically damaged in that, she just has no one and nothing.
Yeah.
At least Bender's clearly got mates.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. she does have nothing, but Claire decides to give her a makeover.
Yeah.
And I think it makes her look worse.
Yeah.
I think she looked way better before. But never mind.
I think a lot of people have objections with this. And I agree too, because, being a bit of an old rocker and a gothy type guy anyway, it always annoyed the crap out of me that they made her all shiny and perfect.
Yeah.
The thing is the intention of that scene.
Well, it's to show that Alison trusts Claire now, and that Claire wants to.
And also that she is discarding. It's supposed to be that she's discarding her armor.
She's being honest and being herself and coming out of her shell and all of that. But obviously, as like you being in the alternative scene growing up, it's a very different message for us.
Yeah,
it's the equivalent of Grease, like, be a slut.
Yeah.
It's basically like
change to get a boy.
It's like, I know what you were trying to get at, but the actual message you're sending is terrible.
I think because it's from what I remember, I think both Sheedy and Ringwald actually tried to get him to change that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they tried, and he said no, because I think his intention was literally.
I can see his intention. I just think that it
doesn't really quite come off that way.
Yeah, it doesn't quite come off the way he intended, I don't think.
No.
But fine. And then for reasons that are kind of beyond me, which I think is the weakest part of the film for me, Andy just decides he's in love with her now, and that's good.
Well, I think the thing is, they have been giving each other looks.
A little bit, but it was never much to me to where I was like, I never really felt like there was much there between them, but...
I don't know. Like, the thing is, there's a couple of times where Andy's definitely looking at her.
Sure, yeah.
And I think it's still a bit, funny, but...
But I think for me, the Claire Bender relationship feels way more natural. That's like, I buy that one. This one feels a bit tacked on at the end for me.
That, I think some people even disagree with that one, but I think that's... Because I think the actors have genuine chemistry, which probably helps there. Yeah, well, Nelson nearly got fired because he's another one of those method actors,
right?
And he spent a lot of time ragging on Molly Ringwald when they were, not in, and it was beginning to get to her. And at this point, so Hughes had a really weird relationship with both Hall and Ringwald, he was kind of going through like a second teenhood with them.
Right.
So they would go out night clubbing and stuff. Those three, they would do stuff together, and he was, she was his muse, and he was going to make more movies with them. He'd already made 16 Candles with her and Hall, and they had this sort of this relationship. And of course, when he realized that she was getting upset about it, he was going to fire Nelson. He was like, "Fuck this shit." It's like,
yeah,
you're it's acting. Stop being a dick.
There is a definite line. I mean, I do quite often read stories about actors going method, and half the time it does sound like you're just being a fucking asshole.
Oh, God, anything
like it must be fucking infuriating to deal with.
Terrible to like. Sometimes you think it sounds like, that sounds really interesting. That you can stay in character, and then, but then if your character's a dick, that person's just a dick to be around all the time.
Well, and you're an actor, you should have the ability to turn it on and off. That's the point of acting. Like,
but there's that story about Laurence Olivier and Dustin Hoffman on Marathon Man.
Yeah. And
for the scene where he gets tortured, apparently he stayed up all night, and he really pushed himself. So this is Hoffman.
Yeah.
Really, really pushed himself, and he sort of came in the next day when he was all haggard and stuff. And Olivier said to him, "What, are you all right? What's happening?" He says, "Yeah." He says, I was into character. And Olivier apparently said, "Oh, dear boy, you should try acting. It's much easier." But I mean, you hear the sort of stories about, oh Christ, what's his name? Leto, like being wheeled around in a wheelchair for Morbius because at that point he was being all weak and stuff. You think, oh really? You made someone push you around in a wheelchair? What is wrong with you?
Well, and he was like sending dead rats to people on the fucking set of Suicide Squad and shit.
Yeah,
it's like I said, a lot of that stuff. I'm just like, you're just being a dickhead, really.
Yeah,
like.
Need any of that shit to get yourself in character. I'm sorry, you don't.
No, not if you're an actual talented actor. I really don't buy it.
No.
I think it's a fine line, but yeah. So anyway,
he was basically, I can't remember who it was that said to him, look, that's his method. He's doing it his method. So Hughes was like, okay, I won't fucking fire him then. But it's like, cut that shit out, basically.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, Brian writes the essay, and that's pretty much the end of the movie, right? I think. Signs it the Breakfast Club, the essay.
Yeah, which apparently the Breakfast Club was what they called the detention when Hughes was at school.
Okay, I didn't know. I always wondered.
Yeah,
I was always really confused by that bit, to be honest. But
it's what they called Saturday morning detention, apparently.
Okay, that makes sense. That being from Bristol, England, that meant nothing to me, and I've never really known why it was called the Breakfast Club. I was like, okay.
I guess I always just presumed that it was to do with the fact that it was a Saturday and that they were there.
Yeah, I guess they were there from the morning.
But yeah, and of course you get when they're being picked up.
I do love the I do love the line from Bender to Claire when he's like, "Do you think?" I think being with me would really piss your parents off, actually. This could be a good thing for you. Like,
yeah, wouldn't I be outstanding in the capacity of fucking off your parents?
yeah. And of course they are. They're like snogging when they turn up, right?
Yeah, and she gives him one of her diamond earrings.
Yeah.
Which he puts in. Alison rips off a number from Andy's Letterman jacket.
Yeah. And we see the making out outside as well later.
Yeah. Brian's picked up by John Hughes playing his father.
Nice.
And yeah, that's pretty much the end. You get that the iconic 80s image of Bender walking across the field and putting his fist up, which is, I think that poster has adorned many a student.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Over the years.
Yeah, it's iconic. So it's like, not, well, I guess almost as iconic as the Rocky fist in the air sort of deal.
Yeah.
Same thing for a different generation.
Certainly is for me.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was The Breakfast Club. Great movie.
Fantastic movie. And I mean, it was made on a million budget. The studio didn't really want Hughes to do it. basically they didn't understand it. It was like, there's no tits or beer in this movie. Why? What? He's like, basically, Hughes said, look, I can film this in one location.
Yeah, it's going to be cheap.
It's going to be really cheap. So they went, fine, here's some money. Go off and do it. So they built the set in a. They scouted for libraries, but apparently every library they found was way too small. So they built it in a disused gymnasium,
right,
in a disused school.
It looks like a school, so it works,
Yeah, it's a brilliant set. I wish my library was like that. It was cool.
Yeah,
cool library.
But yeah, so I highly recommend.
I mean, haven't seen it. It completely cemented them all. It cemented the Breakfast Club. Breakfast Club. Fuck me. The rat. What? Oh, now I'm getting fucked here.
It's the heat, my friend. It's the heat.
Yeah.
I've been struggling through this whole episode. Like my brain keeps going blank where I'm too hot.
The Rat Pack.
Yes.
So it established this, and St Elmo's Fire basically established the Brat Pack, which was obviously a play on the Rat Pack from the Dean Martin days. And of course, there's a sort of a core element to these people, because of course, Nelson and not Sheen, for fuck's sake. Estevez, thank you. Estevez, they were in St Elmo's Fire as well, and Sheedy was in St Elmo's Fire. So there was this sort of like this group of linked teens that kind of, for a very, brief period where, everybody's eyes were on, these kids. And I think, people like Andrew McCarthy are like, I was lumped in with those guys, but I don't know any of them. I didn't hang around with any of those, guys. I think there was a core, like, couple of ones that hung out and partied together, but they were all kind of, lumped in because they were all of a similar age, and they all sort of were in very similar sort of movies.
Yeah.
And, when I was like 13 or 14, those guys were like, they were the coolest. All those movies are, all those movies that I think are great. St Elmo's Fire is, Pretty in Pink, Less Than Zero, and
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah, Ferris Bueller.
I really wish now, because now that it's in the same school, I wish that a year later they could have just got them to cameo in one of those scenes, just like maybe when they're doing the register, just have them there. That would have been so cool.
Or just have "Save Ferris" written somewhere, or
Well, this movie happened first, right?
It did, yeah.
So they'd have to just be, like in a scene in Ferris Bueller would be amazing if they're just in a school, just there, just for 5 seconds.
Yeah,
be awesome. But yeah, so highly recommend The Breakfast Club. Fantastic movie. And we'll be back next week with we got to find some stuff to watch, but the usual new movie things.
Yeah, there's stuff, we'll find it.
Oh, of course, there's stuff out there and we will find it. But until then, stay safe, take care, and we'll catch you next time.